engineers. So, have you ever had a final encounter with a boss? And you throw in the big bad guy who's got loads of special attacks and magical abilities, and then you have the fight, and it just feels like it wasn't really anything special. It was just a bit of a slog of dice rolling. You see, there are a couple of kinds of big bad bosses. There's the story boss, and there's the mechanical boss. There may be some others, but for now, let me introduce you to the mechanical boss. The mechanical boss is different from a standard encounter. In a mechanical fight, you have to use either the scenery or special abilities in order to defeat a character. The scenery is a great way to do it. You don't need to do it with miniatures either. If you're working in theatre of the mind, a good description will suffice. Now, if your players are like some of mine, they'll immediately find the choke points on any setup you put out, and then try to engage every single monster at a choke point so that the monsters can't use any kind of numerical superiority to outwit them. The problem with this is after a few goes of fighting in doorways, you just kind of want them to do something else. When my players engineer this situation, I often like to turn it around on them. The wall crashes down behind you as rocks tumble and smash and roll across the floor. In the dust of the explosion of the wall collapsing, you see movement of a large reptilian creature. Surprise, motherfuckers! I emerge victorious! One of the ways that players are able to gain this choke point advantage is usually by having better ranged attack power, and of course the utility benefit of spells in drawing monsters in, so that the monsters are forced to come and engage the players. You can turn this around on them. It's a well-established fact that a single monster is much easier to kill than a group of monsters in D&D. So if you're putting a single monster against the players, set the scene up so that the monster already has a choke point advantage. In this case, our players can get ranged attacks on the creature, but probably with disadvantage through this narrow gap. Meanwhile, our one hero balances across this dangerous perch, which is covered in water and moisture from the waterfall nearby, causing them to potentially slip, so they're in great peril the whole time. So the monster in this case is using choke points against the players. And sure, give the players some ability to influence the combat too, but what of course they're going to try and do in this situation is try and drag the creature out. But it's got a breath weapon. They're in a place where they cannot escape the breath weapon if they stay there. The only thing they can do here is force their way in. Charge! Yeah. Whoops, slipped. Charge! Always be careful when setting up these types of situations that the players have a route back up, that the cost of failing a dice roll is not death. Make it you climb back up and you're back in the fight, but you've lost some hit points. You may be a little bit tired from running up the stairs. Do you take a break for a turn and take your time to get back up? Or do you sprint back up but gain a level of temporary exhaustion? Another way you can set up a choke point that naturally favours the monsters is with flight. See, your players don't have the ability of flight, and I've always found it something of a game killer to give them the power of flight. So in this case, I've set up a wide cliff front, beyond which there are some little flying baby dragons. Now, this little rock outcropping here is only accessible by flight, but the players could creep round the dungeon through to the nest. But if they do... Quick, sneak round the back! They're now exploring more of the map, which allows me to bring in more monsters. Don't forget, your bad guys can move around a lair just as well as your players can. I emerge victorious! One thing you can do is to use the player's own strategies against them. Let them think they're clever. We hide from the fire-belching demon by taking cover behind the stalagmites. In this setup, I'm allowing the players to get a few easy kills here from behind the cover of the stalagmites, but sooner or later they're going to have to climb over these and make the jump and start taking these guys out up close and personal, because these guys are taking cover too. This one would hide behind the stairs. Over here I have some hiding behind stalagmites and some more here. Back here I have some hiding behind walls. The whole time they're taking fire from this creature up on the raised elevated platform that has a good view of the whole situation. As our heroes get close, this can move, giving up the height advantage to the players. But at the same time, this is not being exposed to attack, it's still belching fire at our heroes. Meanwhile, from behind, more creatures are coming in behind our heroes, using the same cover that they were using. This is a rolling fight. They're after their big bad guy, but ultimately, any advantage they take from cover, any advantage they take from cover, these monsters can use behind them too. The whole while they're having to push forward, fighting through hordes of bad guys in order to try and get to our big bad. I emerge victorious! So far, we've used a surprise wall crash, a choke point set up for the monster, we've used flight, we've used exploration, we've used a chase sequence, and we've used altitude to make our fights more interesting. But these are all examples of using the terrain to make the fight more interesting. There are a few things we can do with monsters too. You enter the tomb to be confronted by a blazing wall of fire between two pillars, each of which are emblazoned with a motif of the sun. Through the flames, you can see a tomb, ancient burial chamber, and beyond that, the brood mother that you have been hunting. In this encounter, I have a monster which is unkillable by the players in any form, using weapons or magic. The only thing that can kill this creature is the terrain. Not just that, she's also a spawn point. This is the brood mother, so she needs her brood. I have 6 players, so every turn I roll my 6-sided dice, and that's how many little grublings appear. Now these grublings are just 1 hit point monsters, and they're going to harass the players. After a while, you're going to have a fair few grublings lined up against this flame wall. Now's the time to reveal how this encounter can quickly get out of hand. Anytime you've got a group of these grublings together, they form a larger creature. And these have a lot more hit points and do a lot more damage. But it keeps coming. Anytime one of these larger creatures forms together with some grublings, they combobulate together to form something even bigger. And still monsters keep coming. Every turn, rolling the d6, until eventually the players are utterly overwhelmed. Any attempt to move through the flames and the players are going to find that their eyebrows vanish and their hair is burnt off. Unless, of course, they've got fire resistance. Dragonborn, charge! Chop chop. But that's not how you solve this encounter. Sure, fire resistance will help you move through the flames, but on inspection, these pillars turn out to rotate, and when they do, this flame wall vanishes. Notice now how these 2 pillars, the suns now line up, so our flame wall appears here, killing everything nearby. And this is how this encounter is solved, and how the unkillable monster, the brood mother, can finally be slain. Once the players realise the destructive power of the flames, however, is where our big guy starts to cause us problems. See, he's going to start ignoring the players and start smashing the pillars, breaking the fire chain, and slowly leaving them without any pillars to work with at all. You can also mix story villains with mechanical villains. As you explore the old man's bureau, you find a note, upon which is written, "Beware the Jabberwock, my son, the jaws that bite, the claws that catch. Beware the Jub-Jub bird, and shun the frumious Bandersnatch." He took his vorpal sword in hand. Long time the manxome foe he sought, so rested he by the tum-tum tree, and stood a while in thought. And as in uffish thought he stood, the Jabberwock, with eyes of flame, came whiffing through the tulgey wood, and burbled as it came. 1, 2, 1, 2. And through the vorpal blade went snicker-snack. He left it dead, and with its head he went galumphing back. "And hast thou slain the Jabberwock? Come to my arms, my beamish boy. O frabjous day, canoe, calais!" he chortled in his joy. 'Twas brillig, and the slithy toes did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borogoves, and the moan wrath outgabe. That, of course, is the poem by Lewis Carroll called Jabberwock. I happen to have one right here. Jibber jabber. But as the poem hints, this is a creature that can only be slain by a vorpal blade. My sword doesn't work, nor my magic, nor my bow, nor my axe. If you don't want to give your heroes a vorpal blade, that's not a problem. In a campaign I ran, I gave them a vorpal butter knife, a ceremonial knife. No combat effectiveness whatsoever, but it did have the vorpal effect. It did no damage whatsoever to anything, save for when you rolled a 20 on your attack, in which case it beheaded the enemy. It was a bit of nonsense fun. Do bear in mind, however, that one of my players was a monk, and he argued endlessly that this was a monk weapon. So these are some ideas on how you can spice up your encounters by using mechanical bosses, and even mixing those mechanical bosses with the story boss. There are many different ways you can make a mechanical boss interesting. The goal is simply to get rid of the bog standard I dice roll, I do some hits, make the encounters more interesting. I try to do that with the vast majority of my encounters by using little cruxes like this. But at the very least, make sure that your mini-bosses and your bosses are interesting, either through story or mechanics as I've presented here.